camera in the nursery caught what nobody's ears did. For 6 nights, the parents thought the bird was the problem. On night 7, they realized the bird was the only reason there still was a night 7. Anouk Marchetti Silva was a respiratory therapist at County General. 14 years on the job. Her professional life was the science of air, what was in it, what shouldn't be, how quickly a small change in one gas could take a small body down. She was proud of that expertise. She was about to spend the rest of her life wishing she had trusted it sooner. Her son Cassian was 15 months old, blonde corkscrew curls that fell into his eyes, a striped dinosaur pajama set he wore 3 nights out of 5, a laugh that started in his belly and worked its way up. He had been a good sleeper since 8 months. He had gone through a normal week of clingy fussiness in early October and then settled again. He was, by every measure Anouk's professional training could produce, a completely fine toddler. Her husband, Emiliano, had brought home an African gray parrot named Otis 6 years ago, before either Cassian or Anouk had been in his life. Otis was 14 years old, a rescue from a colleague who had moved abroad. He was quiet, articulate, and famously indifferent to strangers. He had learned exactly 3 phrases in 6 years. Good morning, where is Emiliano? And a whistled fragment of a jazz tune Emiliano's father used to play. Otis lived in a large custom cage in the family room. He had never once flown into the nursery, which is why the first night made no sense. At 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday in late October, the baby monitor picked up a soft, thumping sound. Anouk woke, checked the video feed on her phone, and saw Otis perched on the top rail of Cassian's crib. She had not known the cage door was open. She woke Emiliano. He walked into the nursery, coaxed Otis onto his hand, and carried him back to the cage. He latched the door. He came back to bed. At 2:14 a.m. Wednesday, the same soft thumping. The video feed showed Otis on the crib rail again. Emiliano checked the cage door. It was closed. Otis had somehow learned to lift the interior latch. They fixed it with a small zip tie. That night, Otis chewed to the zip tie. Thursday night, he was on the crib rail again at 2:11 a.m. By Friday, Anouk was exhausted and frustrated. Cassian had started waking with a mild headache fussiness in the mornings that Otis's nighttime visits could not be helping. She turned off the monitor on Friday night. She had reached the professional conclusion that the parrot was causing her son's disrupted sleep, and she was going to stop looking at footage of it. Saturday morning, Cassian slept until 8:40, which was 2 hours past his usual wake time. He was groggy and unusually quiet. Anouk chalked it up to a growth spurt. Sunday morning, he slept until 9:10. He would not eat breakfast. He held his head briefly in the way small children do when a light is too bright. Anouk watched him and felt 14 years of respiratory therapy come up her spine in a way she did not want to admit to. She turned the camera back on Sunday night. At 1:56 a.m. Monday morning, the camera picked up movement in the nursery. Otis had somehow, again, gotten out. He flew silently into the room, landed on the crib rail, and did what he had been doing for 6 nights. Except now, Anouk was watching in real time on her phone. She saw it clearly. Otis was not disturbing Cassian. He was walking the length of the crib rail with his head lowered, pressing his beak toward Cassian's face, then lifting his head sharply, then repeating over and over. He was not attacking. He was not curious. He was doing the exact behavior an African gray parrot does when it detects a chemical change in the air it does not have the language to name. Sampling, retreating, sampling, retreating. And then Otis did something he had not done in 6 years. He said a word. He said Emiliano, loud, sharp, the way he used to say it when Emiliano first got him. Then he said it again. Then he flew from the crib to the doorway and landed on the top of the door frame and said it a third time. Anak was already out of bed. She was already walking down the hall. She was already noticing something her nose had told her for 6 nights, and her clinical brain had refused to file. The nursery air was slightly, unmistakably wrong. She picked Cassian up. His skin was flushed pink, not the pink of warmth, the specific cherry red pink her 14 years had taught her to recognize on sight. She was in the car in under 3 minutes. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Dr. Renaud Beaulieu at the pediatric ER measured Cassian's carboxyhemoglobin level at 22%. In a 15-month-old, anything above 15% is emergency territory. Anything sustained above 25% begins producing permanent neurological consequence. The fire department found the source in 90 minutes, a cracked heat exchanger in the furnace, venting carbon monoxide slowly into the duct system. The nursery vent was directly above the crib. The main household detector was on the far wall of the hallway with a dead battery Anouk had forgotten to replace at daylight savings. The concentration in the nursery peaked between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. every night when the furnace ran hardest. Dr. Beaulieu looked at Anouk in the waiting room. "What made you check on him?" She could not speak for a full minute. Emiliano answered, "Our Parrot." Dr. Beaulieu nodded, slow, the way physicians do when they have heard the answer before and stopped being surprised by it. African greys have extraordinarily sensitive respiratory systems. Coal miners used canaries for a reason. Parrots register carbon monoxide at concentrations below any home detector's threshold. Yours had been reporting it for 6 nights. Has your dog, cat, or bird ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Cassian responded to oxygen therapy over 48 hours. His levels returned to normal. He was discharged Wednesday. They came home to a repaired furnace, a new detector on every floor, and Otis in his cage, quiet, watching. Anouk opened the cage door. Otis stepped onto her wrist. She carried him into the nursery. He looked at the crib. He looked at the vent. He turned his head toward Anouk and did not say anything. She sat down on the nursery floor and cried for a long time. Otis sat on her wrist and let her. That night, the monitor picked up nothing. Otis stayed in his cage. There was nothing to warn about anymore. He had known that too, before anyone had told him. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. The next one involves a golden retriever who wouldn't leave a sleeping newborn's side for 11 days, and the pediatric cardiologist who explained why.